Okay, let's do this. Today, I have Alan Lazaros with me. His story is going to be very inspiring. I think you guys are going to like this episode. My name is Richard Les Brown. I go by the name of my man Richard. This is the podcast. Welcome to a better lifestyle. So please, Alan, tell a little bit about your story, and we'll get started.
First and foremost, thank you for having me. I think it's always an honor to be interviewed on any platform. I do not take it lightly speaking into the lives of other people. I know that there have been podcasts in the past, books in the past, mentors in the past that have really changed the trajectory of my life. So I really hope that I can be of value today. So as for my story, I'll give you the kind of the short to mid-range version because I have a super long version. Obviously, I often joke I'm hoping to hit puberty at 36. I'm actually 35. And the first thing that I always share before I share my story is that I didn't understand a lot of this at the time. Back 9 years ago, I started listening to podcasts, and you would hear these people who are very seasoned speakers, and they would have these stories that were so articulate and so well. And I would think to myself as a listener, how do they understand how it all worked? So how do they have it all figured out? And so now at 35, I'm starting to really cross the chasm of really understanding my past. But it's very important for everyone to know who's listening that I've worked on it a lot. I did a lot of therapy in my 30s. I've reflected a ton and kind of rewatched the movie of my own life many times now. And I think of it like watching a movie when you're a kid that you see as a child, and then you see it again as an adult and you realize, oh, that's that joke or that's that thing. So just keep in mind when I tell this story that I didn't understand it at the time, but I definitely understand it much better now. Okay, so my story started in adversity for sure. And I think that's been a through line my whole life, quite frankly. But my father passed away when I was 2 years old. He was 28 and I was 2. I had an older sister who was 6, and my mom was 31 at the time. And I think he passed away back in 1990. I had a stepfather from age 3 to 14. His name is Steve Lazaros. So my real last name is actually McCorkle. Irish Catholic. My father was Irish Catholic family. Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette. It was sort of like a big Irish Catholic family. My mom and pop up. And so my real last name is actually McCorkle. I took my stepfather's last name when I was around 7, I think. So from age 3 to 14, I had a stepfather, and I refer to this part of my life playfully as boats and BS. Ski trips, snowmobiles, motorcycles, BMWs. We had a truck. We had a yacht that we did have, and we grew up on a small pond, big lake, or small lake, big pond rather, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of trips, and it was a lot of vacations, and it was a lot of stuff. Dreamcast, Xbox, all the early Christmas presents, that kind of stuff. So we did well financially, but my mom and stepdad didn't get along well. And so it was kind of like on the surface, things look good, but behind the scenes, not so much. And then at 14, my stepfather left my family, took his entire extended family with him. And what I realize now in my 30s is that we kind of weren't talking to my birth father's side of the family because we were sort of trying to be a family unit. My name was Alan Lazaros. I changed my name to Lazarus, that whole thing. And so we don't talk to my birth father's side. So I don't really have that family. Then my stepfather leaves, takes his whole extended family with him. And I haven't seen any of them since. I have spoken to my stepfather on Facebook Messenger, but that's basically it. At that same time, my sister moves out with her older boyfriend. At that same time, my mom gets in a fight with her Aunt Sandy. My Aunt Sandy. Not her sister, Sandy, my Aunt Sandy. And then my Aunt Sandy kind of ostracizes us from that side of the family. So I didn't know this until my 30s, but looking back, reflecting back, I kind of lost 3 families by the time I'm 14 years old. And not only that, but my stepdad got the apartment building and the yacht. We got the house and the dog, and it was just me and my mom in that big house. And my stepfather took 90% of the income with him when he left. So I went from upper middle class, 90s, doing well, early 2000s, to I get free lunch at school now because our income is so low. I shop at Salvation Army for clothing. My mom sold her BMW and bought a Honda Civic, and we just bootstrapped. I didn't even know how I was going to go to college. And my dream was to go to what's called WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's kind of like a mini MIT. And I didn't know how I was going to go. How are we going to afford it? Even if I get in, which it's a really hard school to get into, I don't know how we're going to go. And so I bootstrapped. I just did the only thing I knew how to do. My trauma response was aim higher, work harder, get smarter, dream bigger. That was my trauma response, fortunately. Fortunately. So I got straight A's all through high school. I was the obnoxious kid at the award ceremony who never sat down, just kept getting awards. Math and physics was my jam. And I got in. I got into WPI and I got a ton of scholarships and financial aid, fortunately, but they were academic scholarships and financial aid, which was academics based. I got my computer engineering degree at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, one of the best tech schools in the world. And I was off to the races. And then I stayed for my master's in business. I got my master's in business and then I went into corporate. I lived in LA for a time. I worked for a company called iRobot. I worked for Tyco Safety Products. I worked for Simplex Grinnell. I worked for Cognex. I worked for Sensata Technologies, another company called Oz Development. I was computer engineer, MBA combination, just soul searching in corporate America. I ended up at a company called Cognex. That's where I ended up landing for my corporate career. And they had a motto. I started an inside sales engineering team there, and then I got promoted to outside sales. And so at this point, I went from out of college broke, completely broke, to 65 a year, 65 to 85, 85 to 105, 105 to 125, 125 to almost 200 in my early 20s. And at this point, I don't have a family. I don't have a mortgage. I basically have a lot of money coming in and no expenses. I bought this car, a 2004 Volkswagen Passat that ended up saving my life in cash. I had $84,000 worth of school debt paid off in a single year. That was a really big accomplishment for me. And then I had 150 grand in an investment account with mostly tech companies, Vanguard tech companies, ETFs, which are index funds. And I'm just partying and working and doing what I thought was the American dream. And now I'm 26 and I get in my own car accident. I'm up in New Hampshire with my little cousin. We're not drinking or partying or anything like that, but the snowbanks were covering the yield sign and I was supposed to yield and I didn't. And I saw what I thought was a Mack truck in front of me. I know I promised the short version. This is, believe it or not, the short version. But there was a Mack truck in front of me, what I thought was a Mack truck. And my brain said, we're done. That's it. This is the end for sure. Fortunately, it was not. It was a lift-kitted pickup truck. And both airbags did deploy. And my Volkswagen Passat that saved my life, I bought it $5,000 cash. I love this car. I used to call this car the Tank. It was a German-engineered, heavy steel trap of a car. And I'm convinced that car saved my life. So I'm 26 at the time. And physically, we're okay. But mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I am not okay at all. I almost just died in a car accident. So this was my quarter life crisis, existential crisis. Like, what is the point? Filled with regret. Did I make my own decisions? Am I proud of the man I became? What was the purpose of all of it? And circle back, my father died in a car accident when he was 28, and I got the second chance that he never got. And so that's when I flipped the script. And so the best way I can describe it is prior to 26, I was achievement oriented and I was improvement oriented, but I wasn't self-improvement oriented. So I was achieving at the expense of fulfillment. And then I flipped the script after that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be successful from the inside out this time. And so I went all in on self-improvement, personal development, inner work, therapy, all of it. And I got every book I could get my hands on. And I just went off to the races. Started a podcast, business in this self-improvement space now. And now that's 9 years ago. And now I coach people all over the world. It's quite incredible. But the real thing that I think is important for the context of this conversation is adversity hits and there's two things you can do. You can learn from it, find a way to make better choices and aim higher, for a bigger, better, brighter future, or you can let it crush you. And honestly, I empathize with both. I really do. Fortunately, I think self-belief made the difference for me. I had a lot of self-belief. I was born with a powerful mind, and I always worked hard on developing my mind. And hopefully, if you do the same, I do believe that it can change everything. So, very, very last thing would be I was successful from the outside in prior to my car accident. Now I'm very grateful to say that I'm successful from the inside out. And I've been successful without fulfillment, which absolutely sucks. But I also have been fulfilled without success, which also sucks. Because after that car accident, I went all the way past broke. I liquidated all my assets. I was broke. I was fulfilled. I invested in my personal development, but I didn't have an income. And so a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to that as well. So now I'm fortunate to be successful and fulfilled. And you do need both. You do need both.
Okay. So so you were in corporate, so I guess that led you to your purpose of what you're doing right now uh, as a coach right now, right?
So in corporate, I sold industrial automation equipment. And so in a way, it did lead me to my purpose because I used to sell what's called machine vision technology into manufacturing facilities all across New England, Connecticut, Vermont, and Western Massachusetts for a company called Cognex. And I would go into these factories and these manufacturing facilities, and you'd see these pictures on the wall of all the past where there was thousands of people on the line, the floor. And now it's just robotics and one floor manager. And so I had this statistical understanding, and maybe this is unique to me, but it freaked me out because I was taking jobs. Now, I sold industrial automation equipment that would take jobs. I remember being at an ice cream manufacturer, and I would see these people checking to make sure that the product is good, and then, doing quality assurance. And I would sell the cameras that would do that faster, quicker, cheaper, better, right? And I had this moment of, wow, industrial automation is happening. And it's always going to happen. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, there's kiosks rather than people. That's going to keep happening. It's never going to stop. But if you're not a part of the solution, you are a part of the problem. And so I didn't want to be a part of the problem because what I saw was that the less educated population tends to statistically have more children and tends to have them younger. The more educated population tends to have less children and tends to wait. And so you have a population increasing exponentially that needs jobs, and those jobs are being automated exponentially. So I saw this, the jobs are going down that are available to less educated population, and the need is going up. And so I instead of taking jobs, I wanted to reinvent my career around providing opportunities and helping people build a bigger, better, brighter future where they could have abundance. And before I used to profit as an engineer, computer engineer, off of taking jobs. Now I actually have become profitable by helping businesses create jobs. And so, yeah, my corporate career has brought me down this path, but the car accident was really the line of demarcation for me where I really flipped that script.
Now, leaving corporate at your level of income, it takes a lot of guts to go from that to entrepreneurship. How did you manage to take that leap? Because it takes a lot, like, to bet on yourself, to leave that, to go into the unknown and knowing if it's going to work out.
So that is a great point, and it's so true. And the old me wouldn't have known what you were really asking, because to me it was a no-brainer. But I now realize, having coached so many people now at this point, I'm coming up on my 10,000 hours of coaching, speaking, training, and podcasting. And so now that I've connected with so many people from all over the world, Spain, Italy, Australia, New Zealand, I'm starting to get a more global perspective of human beings, different industries, different cultures, different backgrounds, different ethnicities. And now that I have such a bigger data set, and I'm a computer engineering mind, that'll be clear to everybody, but I kind of get now why it was such a no-brainer for me, even though it was so hard for a lot of people to make that leap of faith. And it's self-belief. So I always had very high self-belief, but you got to remember, the people who have high self-belief, they don't know that you don't. Because most people mirror you. So if I have high self-belief, a lot of people mirror me. And so you walk around in the world thinking everyone believes in themselves because I talk about my goals and then you talk about your goals. And I think you're just as serious about them as I am. And then those people come to you later and they go, oh my God, you did it. And it's like, well, I told you I was going to do it. And then you look at them and what they said. And a lot of times those things don't come true. And you wonder why. Like I thought, so I have friends from home that had all these big goals and dreams and none of them did them. And I did. And I never understood why. And it's self-belief. It's self-belief. So if you struggle a lot with self-doubt and you're out there watching or listening, there's a part of you that really wants to villainize me. There's a part of you that knows that I'm different. It's that I have high self-belief, but I didn't know that. It wasn't until my business partner, Kevin, told me what it's like. He's helped me understand what it's like not to believe in yourself. And it sounds awful personally, but I don't struggle a ton with self-doubt. What I do struggle with is self-worth. And that's a whole nother conversation. But to answer your question, two parts. It did take courage to do that, but for me, it didn't really because I kind of knew it would work out, which I know sounds really arrogant, but when you have a lot of self-belief and you know you're willing to work hard, you really can create the outcomes that you want, particularly if you have a really strong mind. And I was very blessed with a very strong mind. For someone who does struggle with self-doubt, that would be a big risk, and it would be really hard to take that leap of faith. But to me, it was, hey, I have a mentor, and I went to college with all these people that are in corporate, and if I really wanted to, I can always just go back. So, and I did believe it would work out. I believe 10 out of 10. Maybe it's delusion, maybe it's self-belief. I think it's self-belief. And it has worked out, fortunately, even when I was broke, I still held on to that belief. But I think it took a lot of faith, which is belief in something you can't see yet. But I think it took more self-belief. And self-belief is something you can build. Most people who have it are building it unconsciously. They don't even know it. And it's actually a formula that we can get into if you'd like.
I'm just gonna go because sometimes like your story, was that your first business that you started?
No. So I started a business back in 2012 called Campus Libre with a couple different, couple of my roommates and college student friends. We started a company called Campus Libre. It was a campus specific Craigslist for textbooks. And we started with textbooks, and eventually we were going to compete with what's known now as ULoop, which is kind of like, you go to college, you buy and sell furniture, Xbox, whatever it is. It was going to be like a community-based, geographic-based marketplace like Craigslist for college students. That was our plan. The CEO and I ended up having diverging thinking in terms of vision for where the company was going. But no, it wasn't my first company. It was my Next Level University is technically my third.
The reason I was asking is because sometimes you hear these fairy tales like online, or people like they were working, then they lost their job, then they started a business, and then they became a millionaire and a billionaire and all that. So I just want to emphasize, like, sometimes it doesn't always happen like that. Like, you lose your job and then you start your first business and then everything like blows up, it works out. Sometimes it does work like that, but sometimes, like, failure comes and different things happen. So I just wanted to emphasize that, so people like are ready when they get into entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship is, I playfully refer to it, and I am tongue in cheek with this, but like it's kind of like clawing out your own eyes. It's a terrible experience. I'm not saying not to do it. Just understand how bad it is. It's really, really bad. People, especially in the social media space now, it's 3 quick tips to start a business and make passive income, $1 million a year, 4-hour work week. Like that, all of that is absolute nonsense. It's not true. I coach business owners all over the world. I have 22 businesses I coach. I'm telling you right now, in the real world, that's not real. It usually is a decade of pretty much struggle bus, and then the success flips the other way, and then they start teaching a course on it. You can't skip steps. You can accelerate. And so to your point, yeah, I mean, you got to be careful not to study the anomalies. And that's even why I answered the way I did, because in hindsight, that was actually really reckless to leave that corporate career. But for me, it didn't feel reckless because I always knew I could go back if I wanted to. So But I do think that's unique to me because a lot of those opportunities have come to me because I have gifts that other people don't have. And I just want to be, I grew up in a lot of adversity, but I always was very naturally gifted in the intellectual department. And if it wasn't for that, there's no way I could have gotten here. So, I mean, even those scholarships and stuff, going to one of the best tech schools in the world, it was my brain that got me through. It wasn't a good upbringing that got me through. It wasn't, you know, a lot of people look at me now and they think silver spoon, they think white Caucasian American male, you know, good for you. But the truth is, I grew up in a really, 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 really bad environment. And fortunately, I had a big brain and a lot of work ethic and a lot of self belief. And that's really what it comes down to. And a lot of things have worked out and a lot of things haven't, but it's nothing short of an absolute grind. There is no fairy tale Candyland at all.
So your performance coach, what does that mean specifically?
So there's peak performance coaching. I did a whole bunch of different modalities of coaching and really they're just labels for the same thing. But I started with fitness coaching and then I did mindset coaching and then I did peak performance coaching and I did business consulting for a while. And then now I'm doing mostly business coaching. But really what it comes down to is people come to me and they say, hey, I want to achieve X. And I think of it in three sort of sections. You have who you used to be, your past, you have who you are now, and then you have who you need to be to achieve your goals. And people come to me and say, hey, I want to achieve this. And then what you usually figure out is in order for them to achieve this, they actually have to become an evolved version of themselves. And in order to become an evolved version of themselves, you have to study their past. And so what I used to do, I always use this, it's like Dragonite. I always use this as an example. So what I used to do is say, go try to achieve this so you can become this. I don't do that anymore. That was naive. I now understand that you have to figure out who you are at your core and then uncover that for what it is, which is actually the scariest thing, which takes tremendous courage. For someone who is really, really brilliant, it's actually scary. It's scary to own. It's scary to say it because everyone like villainizes you. It's like, oh, how dare you? You think you're so smart. So it's scary to be in your greatness. But it's also scary when you're not great. So the people who don't think they're that great are like pretending they're great. And the people who are really, really, really great are like pretending they're not because it's scary. So what I try to do in coaching is help people figure out who they really are. And usually that's hidden in the past. It's not something that you create, it's something you uncover. And then when you uncover that, you can go back into the present and then create goals that are actually aligned with who you really are. One of the reasons we don't achieve our goals is that they're not aligned with who we really are. So even if you do achieve them, they're not fulfilling and you can't sustain it. And that's the thing about success that's so interesting. The world's biggest lie, in my opinion, is that success makes your life easier. Success makes life harder because now you have to sustain it. Back when I was doing one episode a week with Kev, when we first started, life was so much easier. Now we do 7 a week, actually 8, 9 now, because I have 3 podcasts now. And I have 22 clients. Like, that's awesome. I love my life more now than I did back then, but my life's not easier. It's way more difficult. It's easier on the financial side, but it's way more difficult to sustain. So remember that one of the reasons we don't achieve success and people come to me and they for performance or business or whatever coaching they want. And what I really help them do is realign their goals with what is actually sustainable for them. If you're an entrepreneur in your DNA, in your blood, for lack of better phrasing, you cannot work for other people. You just can't. It's like unthinkable to work for other people. If you don't feel that way, you have no problem working for other people and having a steady paycheck, do not be an entrepreneur. It's such a bad idea. And so you got to know self-awareness is the game. And that's what coaching really is in a nutshell. People come to me because they want to achieve X, Y, and Z, when in reality, they need to actually uncover who they really are.
How would someone break bad habits?
So the bad habits are usually a mask for something deeper. So for me, stepdad, father passed away, never talked about my father passing away until after 26. I never even talked about it with anybody. So this is the kind of playful joke that I say is if you want a therapist, you need a coach. If you want a coach, you need a therapist. So I wanted a coach. I had dozens of coaches and mentors, and I really needed therapy. And a lot of people have a therapist, but they don't have coaches. And so success and fulfillment, right? So what does it mean to have toxic habits? We all do. There's virtues and vices, and we all have constructive habits and destructive habits, all of us. And they vary in scope and size and frequency and intensity and density. But at the end of the day, it needs to be congruent with your goals. So, for example, if you're a bodybuilder and you want to build muscle, overeating is a good habit. If you're not a bodybuilder and you don't ever exercise, overeating is a bad habit. So habits are good or bad, contextual based on the goal and the circumstance. And so most of us have, but virtues and vices are universal. So vices are greed, bullying, pride, ego. Virtues are compassion, love, work ethic, discipline. You can feel it. You can feel the difference between virtue and vice. And unfortunately, I think everyone needs to start with eliminating vices. I really do. I don't think you can build good habits on a bad foundation. So for me, I had to eliminate alcohol. I eliminated all drugs. I eliminated all pornography. I just started to slowly eliminate all vices. And then I started to become more virtuous, and I started to become more worthy, more self-worth. And for me, that was really the issue, because self-worth was the problem.
In a quick, like a 2 minutes, like you were saying, from the accident, like that was uh, the moment, like the turning point. How does someone like deal with something like that emotionally, mentally, and physically?
The first thing is get help. I didn't. So after my car accident, I struggled a ton. I had post-traumatic stress disorder a little bit from the car accident. I had claustrophobia. I had to puff my chest up and like walk in and out of doors. Ceiling fans bothered me. Crowds really bothered me for a time. I kept on getting pulled over because I was too far on the right side of the road, because when I got in the car accident, I was on the wrong side of the road. So double yellow lines, I was always kind of scared. So and luckily the police officers were very kind. And I said, listen, I got in a bad car accident. I'm sorry. Because they kept pulling me over for being too far on the right. But at the end of the day, I would say get help. And the post-traumatic stress side, we know about, but we don't talk enough about the post-traumatic growth. So a lot of growth came, which was really good, but a lot of trauma came too from the car accident. And so for anyone out there who, it really is that, I think the reason life is so hard is because it's always, we have to be ambidextrous. It's always an and, it's never an or. You have to be strong and you have to be warm. You have to be humble and you have to be confident. Those are two hard things to be. Anyone who's super confident tends to be overconfident. I struggled with humility. I didn't struggle with confidence. Anyone listening knows that. And if you are super humble, great, that's awesome. Keep that. But you need to be more confident, probably. Everything in life is a dance between two extremes. And unfortunately, we're all righty or lefty. But the 21st century requires us to become ambidextrous. So we have these wonderful, inner developed, holistic, heart-driven people that don't succeed in the economy. And then you've got these super professionally developed resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, and they crush it in the economy, but their families suffer and they get divorced and they're not healthy. And so to me, I think we all can become ambidextrous. And I was on the professional end. So I started out in professional development and then I went personal development after my car accident. And so for anyone out there who wants transformation, which is why you're listening to this show, figure out I always say, if what you wanted was what you needed, you'd already have it. What did I want? I wanted more mentors and coaches. I wanted more training. I wanted more productivity. I wanted more resume, cover letter, That's not what I needed. What I needed was a therapist. And then you have other people who've been doing therapy since they were 11. They love it. And they're journaling. They have the inner work, their personal development. But what they need is professional development. You need a coach. You need to work. You need work ethic. We are all righty or lefty. And this is why podcasting is so hard. I can say one piece of advice. I could say, everyone out there needs to work harder. That's not true for some of you. Some of you are already working so hard, you actually need to work on R&R, rest and relaxation and recovery. If I say you need more rest, relaxation, and recovery, the people who already rest too much are like, yeah, nice, awesome. No. You need work ethic. That's why I love coaching. Coaching is one-on-one, customized. The principles remain the same for all of us, but the way you apply them is different for all of us. It's always an and not an or. So if you're confident, you need humility. If you're humble, you need confidence. If you're strong, you need warmth and vulnerability. If you're warm and vulnerable, you need strength. And unfortunately, in this industry, everyone's hammering their extreme, and it's actually a spectrum.
Where can people find you on social media or the internet?
So I use Instagram, I use Facebook, and I use LinkedIn. Those are the only three that I really use at this point. But Next Level University is the name of our podcast. It is on any podcast platform. I'm on YouTube. You can also Google my name, Alan Lazaros, AlanLazaros, nextleveluniverse.com, nextleveluniversity.com. Someone has that URL and is asking for a lot of money. So we just went nextleveluniverse.com. Everything's on there. We've got a book club. We've got meetups we do every month for free. We've got a journal on there. We got all kinds of cool stuff, but you can reach out anytime. Please, just if you do, just provide context, because like all of us, I get a lot of spam.
Okay. Thanks. Great nuggets today. Thanks, Alan, for being here. It was nice meeting you and talking to you. On that note, thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to this podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Goodbye.